And we're back to the KILMAINHAM jail in Dublin, Ireland. Episode 5. We left off with these dramatic changes in Irish political history. All changed utterly. We're going to review the fallout of the 1916 Easter Rising. And in this particular poster, we learn of societal and political reaction. A compelling phrase in his great poem, Easter 1916, Yeats wrote, "All changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born." A terrible beauty resonates in Irish culture as we speak. Though the initial popular response to the Rising was one of anger at the destruction caused to the heart of Dublin, the executions quickly changed the mood. Recall in the previous episode, 14 rebels were executed by British forces in the aftermath of the 1916 Rising. Memorial masses and fundraising events for relatives of the leaders became rallying points for expressions of sympathy. Within months, the poetry and prose of Pearse, Connolly, MacDonagh, Plunkett, again, all of these military leaders of the Irish were executed in 1916. Their stories began appearing in popular editions. From these writings emerged the impression not of reckless adventurers, but of men who had sacrificed their lives patriotically for an independent Ireland. Following the Rising, hundreds of young insurgents, among them Michael Collins, were sent off to internment. That is, they were incarcerated in England and Wales, where they formed closely bonded groups who developed a single-minded determination to achieve the republic announced in the 1916 Proclamation, a historic document. Finally, the government's attempt to introduce conscription, highly unpopular in Ireland, deepened the mood of alienation. Conscription, that is, the British government was drafting Irishmen into the British military armed forces. All of this came to head in the watershed election of November 1918. And things get more complicated. The War of Independence. Once again, these are storytelling institutions. KILMAINHAM Jail is just not a prison museum where visitors can pop in and out and appreciate some architecture and then be on their way. This is a storytelling institution. Sinn Féin, the victory in the general election of 1918 was followed by a meeting of the first Irish Parliament in 1919. The first act of the new Irish Parliament was to issue a Declaration of Independence based on the 1916 Proclamation. On the same day, 2 policemen were shot dead by members of the military wing, the Irish Republican Army in Tipperary. British forces in Ireland were soon engaged in an all-out guerrilla war with the IRA. The 2 special units, the auxiliaries and the Black and Tans, were introduced to help contain the situation. These are British units. Their brutal and undisciplined behavior strengthened popular sympathy for the Republicans. At the height of the Troubles, as the conflict became known, KILMAINHAM was once again used as a place of detention for the swelling numbers of Republican prisoners. Following the signing of the treaty in 1921, KILMAINHAM emptied once more, but only for a brief while. KILMAINHAM, as I've said in previous episodes, quoting other historians and other Irish commentators, KILMAINHAM is known as the Bastille of Ireland. There's more. the treaty. The truce of 1921, followed by 5 months of negotiations between the Republicans and the British government. It resulted in the signing of a treaty in London in December. The treaty stopped short of recognizing the Republic declared in 1919. When it was debated in the Irish Parliament over Christmas and the New Year, it proved deeply divisive. The main focus of Republican unhappiness was the section requiring an oath of allegiance to the King of England. Surprisingly, only a few speakers voiced concerns with the partition of Ireland into 6 and 26 states. The 26-county state of the 6-county state of Northern Ireland had been set up in June 1921, though it passed by a narrow majority, 64 to 57, who favored accepting a 26-state with limited independence under the crown. It left ominous divisions between men and women who up to that point had been comrades. The partition. The partition separating the North and the South. These are historic developments that would lead to more issues, debate, and problems decades to follow. And here we have pro-treaty, 64, anti-treaty, 57. Let's see what Michael Collins has to say about this. In my opinion, it gives us freedom, not the ultimate freedom that all nations desire and develop in, but freedom to achieve it. Michael Collins. And here we have Eamon de Valera. Recall, Eamon de Valera was spared execution in 1916, in large part due to his U.S. citizenship. Eamon de Valera. And this is his comment on the treaty. I am against this treaty because it does not reconcile Irish national aspirations with association with the British government. I am against this treaty because it will not end the centuries of conflict between the two nations of Great Britain and Ireland. The Irish people would not want me to save them materially at the expense of their national honor. Eamon de Valera, who would become the Taoiseach, Irish Prime Minister, as well as President of Ireland, of the Republic, years later. The Civil War. Everything is moving so rapidly in Irish history. It's hard to fathom these upheavals in such a short period of time. The emergence of a deep split among the members of the Irish Parliament during the treaty debates was followed by 6 tense months of attempts to avoid violent conflict. However, when Republicans seized the four courts and other public buildings, including Kilmainham, the atmosphere of confrontation heightened. Eventually, these tensions erupted in civil war in 1922, and the Free State government's decisions to dislodge the Republicans from the four courts by force. The government used Kilmainham as a place of detention for Republican prisoners. Now the guards were no longer British soldiers, but Free State troops. Many of them former comrades of the men they were guarding. In 1922, the government introduced legislation empowering military courts to impose the death penalty. 77 Republicans were to be executed under legislation during the Civil War. the first 4 in Kilmainham in 1922. A remarkable series of events in such a short period of time. Kilmainham, a national treasure, the Bastille of Ireland, would undergo renovation for 30 years before it was finally open to the public. Help us restore the jail. No skill needed. We will train you. Join the Kilmainham Volunteers. A storytelling institution with performance. Let's pause and return for episode 6 that will allow us to pull a lot of these issues together and formulate a coherent conclusion of this particular visit to Kilmainham.